Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Rocket Mortgage Classic. Gonna break down all things Detroit Golf Club for you, get you guys ready for this week's tour event with a look at some of the custom modeling for this week, the key stats and comps that I'm using to identify my top plays. We'll talk some analytics via Bet the Number, exactly how this golf course plays, and a hole-by-hole breakdown to show you all the different shots required around this venue. So by the end, you'll be an expert on what to expect. And we've got a whole lot to go through here, so it's not waste any time whatsoever. It started off with first off, a look at the course details. Just like the Travelers, you're going to see a relatively low winning score here, and this is a par 72 as opposed to a par 70, so you do have the 4 par 5s to attack, and it's not a lengthy par 72 either, at just under 7,400 yards. And just like the Travelers as well, you do have similar type of agronomy here. You've got bent POA greens, also bluegrass rough, which is very typical of these northeastern to midwestern golf courses. And as a Donald Ross design, you do have small greens as you typically see at his golf courses, but it plays relatively soft in Detroit this time of year, usually a lot of rain that's coming through. And looking at the forecast for Monday through Wednesday, it's looking the exact same this time around. So last year, believe it or not, the -18 winner with Cam Davis was one of the lowest winning scores we've ever seen around this course, and usually it's 20 to 25 under par that's winning. So with the forecast, I'd expect it to get closer to that number, especially if we don't have a whole lot of wind that's in the forecast. And a few other things to note is that there's not a whole lot of water in play on this golf course. As you'll see when we go hole by hole, it's relatively wide open. You do have quite a few bunkers, but they are some of the easiest to play out of on all the PGA Tour. And there's a slightly different routing for the tournament course at this event compared to what you have for your tour members, or I should say your club members at any given week. But that's nothing different than what we've had at this course the last few years. So when we take a look at the course analytics, you'll see that these green categories are easier than your PGA Tour average. So easier to hit fairways, greens around this golf course. Also more birdies and less bogeys per round than what you typically see. Hence why the winning score gets close to that -25 number. Scrambling rate though, 3-putt percentage is not that different than what we're used to seeing, as well as all the specific holes. So part of the reason why it plays easy is because it's a par 72 and you don't have that many difficult holes on property. And if you really want to break it down further, we could take a look at the driving bias, where it is a 6.6 out of 10 with the Bombers Paradise ranking. So a better course than most when it comes to hitting that long stick, and that's because it's wide open. You can hit driver on almost every single hole. There's really only one layup hole out of the 14 on the course. Your approach distribution is also really balanced. Unlike last week where we had 8 shots per round in that 125 to 175 yard range, you've got quite a few from 50 to 125, 125 to 175, and the long irons are used around this golf course, but maybe not as much as what we typically see out there. So the around the green distribution, very flat, not really that much to point out there. You do make quite a few putts around this golf course, and there's not that many putts per GIR because you only have those 5,000 square foot greens, so not a whole lot of square footage to work with. That's also why the 3-putt percentage isn't too out of hand. And as you'll see when we go hole by hole here, it's a lot of wedges that players are going to have in hand. So hole 1, relatively wide open. Not everyone's going to take driver here, because even if you don't, it's still going to be a pitching wedge at most in small green complexes, but they don't really have anywhere to hide these pins. You don't have a lot of locations just over bunkers or anything like that, and it's a lot of soft contouring, so that's why the scoring gets so low around here. Next up we have hole 2, which is 455, pretty straightforward par 4. You're going to see a lot more drivers here just because of the added length, but a slightly more generous landing area. And I will say that this front 9 is tighter than the back 9. You do have some out of bounds in play, a little bit more tree lined fairways on the front side of the golf course, but the back 9 is where you really see it open up. So let's go to 391, another shorter pitch and putt par 4. If you're not an accurate player, you may choose to hit less than driver here, but you've got a ton of room down the right, so a lot of people would just aim up the right side there and bang a driver. Next up, you have your first par 5. It is hard to reach in 2, so this is a hole where having that power comes into play. Also, a completely wide open tee shot as opposed to these outside of these bunkers on the left side, and your longer players can take those out of play, especially if it's playing downwind. It's hard to reach in 2, but even if you don't, it's going to be a wedge shot to one of the bigger green complexes that we have on the course. Next up, we have 5, which is a shorter par 3. Expect there to be a ton of birdies here, just kind of like 11 at last week's Travelers. Another really short par 3. 6 is 469. It is a slight dogleg from left to right. Another very generous landing area. So though the front 9 is a little bit more constricted by the trees, you've got 30 wide yard corridors to hit. So that's why guys like Cam Davis, Ricky Fowler, that aren't the most accurate players off the tee, have found some success around this golf course. Next up, you have 7, which is 558. Even your shortest players in the field will be reaching this green in 2. So expect to see quite a few eagles, and of course a birdie rate likely over 50%. 8 is 374, so another shorter par 4, pitch and putt. You're going to say that a lot around Detroit Golf Club. 9 is 208, so it is a longer par 3. This is one of the few shots outside of the par 5s where you're going to have something over 200 yards, so you can't completely ignore those proximity buckets, but it is mostly shots from 175 and in. Next up, we have 10, which is 427, dogleg from right to left. Another shorter hole where you don't have to take driver. It does make your fairway a lot wider if you don't take the big stick. If you do take the big stick, you can force it down to this next little area, this little square fairway patch. It's really a pitch and putt par 4 if you can pull that off. 11 is 233, so another longer par 3, so just like 9. You're going to get tested with the long irons on a few holes. 12 is 483, another longer hole, but look at the back 9, just so much more wide open. You can see in the driving area that the trees aren't as close to the fairways, and you don't have those out of bounds in play like you had for the first few holes. So 13, 395, another short pitch and putt par 4. 14's a very reachable par 5, the one hole that does have water in play though, so you can't fall asleep on the second shot, as especially with left side pin locations, that water hazard does come into play. 15's another short par 3, so just like the first short par 3, expect there to be a ton of birdies at 15. 16 is 450, so another pretty straightforward par 4. Extremely wide landing area, so it's about like 40 yards wide there, so it'd be really hard to miss the short stuff if you don't shank it. 17 is another reachable par 5, so you can see where the birdies come in bunches around here. Just wedges in play for like half the par 4s. 4, at least 3 potentially reachable par 5s, and then even some par 3s where you can add on top of it. And then the finishing hole is a little complicated. I'd say it's the hardest hole out here, at least because of the angle off the tee. It's really hard to hit fairway because of how it's angled with that tee box. And this little ditch, though there's not water in it, there's not going to be like any penalty drops down there. It is a very awkward up and down. So if they use that right side pin location, I guess watch out for that ditch. But any left side pin location really isn't all that bad. So I guess it comes down to the pins. Sunday, they will use something a little bit closer towards the ditch side, but a golf course that you're going to see a ton of birdies made on. So when we go to our custom modeling, we take a look at our key stats. I do have the 4 shots gained categories mixed in. That would be off the tee, approach, around the green, and near putting. But the other stats comes down to how many birdies we can make and how we can get somebody to 20 to 25 under. First off would be birdie or better percentage. That is the number 1 key stat I think you should be looking at. Guys that can make a whole bunch of birdies, and this is over the last 24 rounds, actually have a chance to get to something that's 20 plus under par. So a Keith Mitchell, a Norman Zhang, that's a small sample size, also Korn Ferry Tour player, so I don't know if I take that one as seriously, but your Killa Keiths, your Harry Halls, your Matt McCarty's, etc., these guys in the top 5, top 10 that we do see on the PGA Tour on a rather consistent basis. The Højgaard twins, Nikolai towards the top, as you guys can see. All really good course fits around here because there are certain guys that are more conservative. They do it with their bogey avoidance as opposed to their birdie or better percentage. We want the guys that do it with their birdie or better percentage, that go pin hunting, can make 6 or 7 birdies per round. And not only is that important to getting to that winning score, but also from the Draftkings DFS perspective, where our Draftkings score is heavily tied to how many birdies we're making. Par 5 scoring, also very important around this golf course. You've seen a lot of the winners, the guys finishing top 5, top 10, really take care of the par 5s in their assault up the board. So Cameron Champ, also a relatively long player off the tee, is going to get some credit there. Alejandro Tosti, Mark Hubbard, also PGA Tour regulars that we see towards the top end. Going to ignore the Norman Zhang thing just because he's not really playing with the big guys that much. But your Vince Whaley's, your Rico Hoey's, your Sammy Valamakis, and Harry Hall once again showing up. You can see who's number 1 in the modeling for this week. Another player that you might want to keep an eye on. And then if you're looking at specific putting stats, I am looking at putting form heading in, just regular on every type of surface over the last 24 rounds. I think that matters, as we would typically say. But if you want to look at the bent POA surface, which is the type of agronomy that we have for this golf course, and look at a player's career baseline. That's what I'm doing in this category. I think that's a really good idea as well. So you can see Keegan Bradley, of course, winner at the Travelers multiple times on this same type of grass. He's really good at putting, which would make sense because he's from the area. Harry Hall also gaining close to 0.9 strokes per round on bent POA. But guys like a Matty Fitz, Thurston Lawrence, especially the players with a bigger sample size, so like Clanton, maybe not so much, Thirsty Lawrence, not so much. But like your Victor Perez's, your Matt Kuchar, who has a massive sample size on this surface. Even like a Taylor Moore, a Putnam, or a Peter Malnati, or a Baddeley that we've seen out here for 5 to 10 years. We know that this isn't just the case of them putting well in a few tournaments over the last year or so, and that's why they're gaining like 0.7, 0.8 strokes per round. These are players that over 10, sometimes even 20-year careers, like Aaron Baddeley has been able to do that sort of thing. Now, Baddeley, well past his prime at this point, losing a bunch of strokes off the tee, so maybe not the best example, but like your Andrew Putnams, your Taylor Moores that are much more recent players, guys that are playing better golf over the last 24 measured rounds, could be worth a few extra looks there too. And the last category I've got in my custom modeling would be the approach from 50 to 150 yards. So if you want to take a look at the wedges, because of the plethora of shots that you're going to have in that range, that can make quite a bit of sense. A lot of these guys towards the top are players on the Korn Ferry or some of the smaller PGA tours that you can't really look at apples to apples. But the first players that we see consistently out here would be your Victor Perez's, your Rasmus Højgaards, Rico Hoey, Max McGreevy, Castillo, Grillo, etc. that are all going to get a significant boost in my modeling this week. And if we put it all together, this is just my first iteration of the model this week. Probably going to have to make a few changes by the time that we get it finalized. But number one's Harry Hall. I'd love to see that. Keith Mitchell, number two, another player that really fits this style of golf. In fact, we have 4 perfect 10s on the rankings. They've got Grillo at a 10 out of 10, also a Ben Griffin who has that same sort of ranking. So a lot of players up here that are strong course fits, and you can see a lot of them correlate to the betting odds. So, you know, it's a week where a lot of your good bets are going to have pretty terrible odds, I would say, just because you don't have your Scotty Schefflers, your Rorys teeing it up in a field like this. But if we can find some diamonds in the rough, like a Sami Valimaki and Emiliano Grillo, like maybe he's worth a few extra looks. A Thorbjorn Olesen, he's been in contention a few times this year. A Vince Whaley, etc. Cameron Champ at 100 to 10 to 1. Those could be really good DFS plays, or even, you know, a sprinkle or two for a long shot on your outright betting card. And on top of the shots gain metrics, I'm also looking at a few comp courses. Number one would be the CJ Cup Byron Nelson, which if you run any sort of stat modeling and any sort of correlation analysis with these golf courses to golf courses, CJ Cup Byron Nelson is the number one correlated golf course compared to what we have at this week, which makes sense because it's a longer par 71. It's a par 72 this week, but you are going to have some opportunities to attack the par 5s around there. And even though it is on paper a harder ball striking test, you get winning scores of 20 to 25 under par, especially when it was a par 72. They did change it to a par 71 at some point, but before that, it was almost the exact same scoring as what you have at Detroit Golf Club. So you can take a look at that for some crossover. John Deere Classic is where we'll be next week. It is also a par 71, but if you take a look at the approach profile, a lot of shots from 175 and in, so very similar to this week. Almost the same kind of Bombers Paradise ranking as well. So, and a lot of scoring that you're going to see at the John Deere, even as a par 71. And then lastly, it's also the Silverado Resort. So that's home of the Procore Fortinet Championship before that. Another course that's a par 72, relatively short too. And when we take a look at the approach distribution, it is almost identical to what we have this week. Now, a little bit less of a Bombers Paradise. You're not going to be hitting as many drivers around Silverado, but it's not like you have to be a bomber to find success around here, right? There's a reason why I wasn't looking at driving distance in my modeling. I think having, you know, distance is kind of nice to have, but I'm just going to look at regular off the tee to encapsulate that, because I don't think that there's a massive advantage to being very accurate or very long. I think having a good combination of both is the way to do it, which is why guys like Keith Mitchell were getting such a massive advantage there. A little bit different at Silverado, a little bit more accuracy based, but I think if you want to look at some of the leaderboards for that crossover, you could get a lot out of doing that as well. So that's all for the course breakdown this week, giving you guys an idea of exactly what to look for in your players, and let's have a good one. Alrighty guys, that is all I've got for this week's course breakdown. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come, including our DFS and betting preview, which will be dropping a little bit later on this evening, as well as all the content for rounds 2 through 4 showdown, props, for rounds 2 through 4 as well, and all the content throughout the entire event. We've got a lot of live stuff that we do. We're not a channel here that just previews stuff before the event starts, but also as the event is going on. So subscribe so you don't miss any of that when it drops. Also, go ahead and comment what you've got for the winning score for this week, your prediction that is, for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. If you're the first person to guess that correct winning score, you will win a free month access over there, which is where I'm posting all my projections for these events. So for main slate, for DFS purposes, I've got every single player on there in terms of modeling. I've got recent form rankings, shots gained metrics, there are past results at this golf course, you name it. Everything you need to research the field on my Patreon page, as well as all the prop stuff I'm doing on Underdog and Prize Picks, going over stat averages for these courses, weather reports, predicted averages as well, to get you guys ready for how to attack each category, and every single piece of exposure that I'm taking on those sites as well. And like I said, for a chance to earn all of that for free, a fully all-encompassing membership on my website, just go ahead, give me that winning score below. Early bird gets the worm there. Again, it'll be the first person to guess it that ends up winning that free access. Best of luck with the giveaway. Best of luck with everything, all your exposure that you guys are getting to for this week, whether it's in DFS or on the prop and betting side of things, as we'll talk through a little bit later on closer to lock. Let's make it a good one. It's a birdie fest. Definitely going to see a lot of scoring out there. So let's try and get some guys that can get to 20 plus under par and try and post something and get a dub. It was heartbreaking to see Tommy Fleetwood lose last week. Didn't have a cent on him, but that just shows you how hard it is to win out here in the PGA Tour. This sort of golf course could give us a brand new PGA Tour winner. It's wide open. I think a lot of different players could see themselves towards the top, which to me makes it a very exciting week. So super stoked to get to all that content a little bit later on. Subscribe so you guys don't miss any of that when it drops. And let's have ourselves a week at the Rocket Mortgage Classic.